I've been
faith.
reading in Matthew, in
Yes.
the book of Matthew, and
Yeah.
one thing that has stuck out to me so much is that Jesus is doing all of these healings, but it's like faith is the catalyst for all of it. It's like he healed them because they had faith. He healed them because they believed.
Yeah.
And that has been challenging me so much in this season of like, you didn't have to do a dance or like,
Right,
it was
exactly.
Like, it was because of people's faith in Jesus that he was able to perform the miracle.
That. Welcome to the Girls Podcast. Y'all, I am so excited for you to meet Cassidy. Some of you know her, some of you do not, but get ready to grow and be encouraged.
I'm so excited
Welcome.
to be here.
It's
Thank
our first
you.
time
It's
having
our
you
first
on,
time.
which is so special.
I'm so honored to be here.
I just want to say, when I was thinking and praying about, when I was like texting you early this morning, I was texting you early this morning, and I was just thinking about who you are, who you've become. I was getting emotional. And as we were crafting the questions, I was group texting with Liv and Lindsay, and we were crafting the questions, and I was getting emotional thinking about the woman that you've become. And I'm so excited for the girls to get to hear from you and learn from you because they see you. You're like such a boss. You're an amazing wife. You're an amazing mom. You're an amazing like dean of our college.
Thank you.
And you're such a family girl. You're so good to your family. And you treat everyone like family, but the way that you're so loyal to your family, if there's anything going on in your family's life, you're like the first one there. But then you have that same heart and love for the people that you meet at church. And I was at an event recently, and some girls were talking about like what a boss you are. And they were saying like when they see you down the next gen hallway, they like know that everything is going to be fine because you bring such a sense of safety and stability. And so I'm just excited for the girls to get to hear from you today.
Thank you so much. I feel like everything I've learned has been from being in this house. It's been over 5 years now, which is crazy to think about. But it's this house that has brought that out of me and has taught me, watching you and Pastor Earl, watching how you both lead. And so I'm just grateful to be under this covering and in this house for sure.
I'll never forget. And we're going to talk about a ton of stuff, but girls, I want you to stay with us because Cassie has navigated some amazing things like tough things, but you've allowed God to bring out like the purest oil in the press. And I want the girls to learn about that press season and how beauty is on the other side of the press. But I'm going to take it back to, I remember like one of the first times we hung out, I think we had Mexican food at my house.
Yes.
And we were getting ready for Thanksgiving or something. And we got takeout Mexican food and we're like eating and talking. I remember y'all left and Earl was like, that couple is so special. And around that time or not too long after, he saw y'all in the hallway or he reached out to someone and said, they need to be on the youth team. They would be amazing on the youth team. And then you fast forward and y'all said yes, which I feel like you both have been so faithful in your yes, even though you didn't know what was on the other side of the yes. You have had a yes spirit. And I remember that moment when we're like, hey, come to youth night. Can you serve at youth? And then fast forward, I remember us saying like, we want to hire them. Like we want this couple on staff. But can you give people a little like backstory of like who you were before you're the Cassidy that we all know and love? Because I think it's important for people to have context.
Sure. I always have said this, like you guys saw the gold in us before we saw it in ourselves. And you talk about that yes spirit. It's been so many times where I've wanted to be like, no, I don't think it's me.
Right.
I don't like, are you sure? Are you sure you're choosing the right person? And I feel like it's those yeses that have led to so much growth on the other side. The times you were like, I don't know, because I remember coming in, I remember being at your house, I remember serving at youth, and I was actually I was a nutrition, so I was in my dietetic internship. I did not know that ministry was my next step. I hadn't like prepared for any of that, and I remember you texting us and being like, hey, we want to put your name in the hat to come on staff as our Bigs director. And I remember being like, Bigs? That was our first through fifth grade. And being like, I am so I am so not equipped to serve in Bigs. And it was obviously through prayer and through so much just like praying and seeking God that it was so clear. He was like, this is your next step. This is your next step in obedience, was coming on staff here. But I remember, I always say, y'all took a chance on us.
We did.
We were kind of ragamuffins. Like we kind of were like, we didn't really know what we were doing. We were young.
Man.
We were just like, God told us
Yes.
and they see something in us. And I remember at that time, like just feeling so not sure of myself, not confident in who God had called me to be, questioning what is my purpose, questioning like, you know, what more does God have for me? Does he have anything more for me? And so I just can't even believe that was 5 years ago.
Neither
and
can
you
I.
saw the gold in us before we saw it in ourselves.
It makes me so emotional, like listening to you talk, because you have such confidence and such leadership, and anything we place in y'all's hands, you carry it. Like we have this phrase here that we probably stole from someplace that says, carry it like a baby, not a ball.
Yep.
And you guys carry everything like a baby, but then you've become like NICU specialists.
Aw,
And you're
that's
just
so
like
kind.
anything we hand to you, you handle it with such precision and care.
Well,
So it makes
thank
me
you.
emotional and tear up because I remember like those early days. And I remember like when we interviewed y'all, and I remember when you came to our house and we like ate together, but then sitting across from you today and just seeing you in action, it is just, and I know we're all still on the journey.
Yeah,
And
for
that, not
sure,
saying
for
like you've
sure.
arrived.
Oh,
I
for
haven't even
sure.
arrived.
No,
None of
for
us have.
sure.
But just watching the evolution because you said yes and then the world shut down. And we went
That's
into the
so
pandemic.
true. And we had to become YouTubers.
Exactly.
Which I had never even worked a
Literally,
camera
you started
in my life.
making videos and content.
That was a wild
and
time.
like preaching to kids, but not in the room. Everything was on video. But then you guys got really good at it. And we had these extravagant like presentations of the gospel through creativity that you guys didn't even know that you had. But then you fast forward 5 years later and I watched your life. I watched the family girl that you are. Then not too long ago, you guys did something, because here's the deal. I feel like life can come at you in your teens, in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and beyond. And even if someone on the outside, they see you and they see your husband, and you guys are just like a stunning couple, you have such presence, people can make assumptions. And they can think they've never been through anything hard. They've had it so easy. They don't understand what it means to be tough or sacrifice. Like it just all came to them. But what they don't see is what formed you into who you guys have become and are becoming. But I think that also you did something wild, which is you decided to like adopt like someone in your family who wasn't a baby.
14, now 15.
When you think of someone like, oh, if someone's in their 50s, oh, like, okay, they'll adopt a teenager, surely. Someone in their late 30s, they'll adopt a teenager, surely. But like the fact that you guys adopted a 14-year-old, can you just talk about that? Because you could be, he could like, he's your son, but technically he could be your brother.
No, it's it's really funny when we go to places and they're like, do you want a student ticket too to the football game? And you're like, not
actually, I'm his mom.
You're like,
yes.
Yep. No, I feel like Thomas and I's marriage, we just decided no matter what, we wanted to be obedient to what God has called us to do. And like I kind of said earlier, it's been the times where I feel like God's put a tug on our heart and we just want to be like, no, like that's wild to actually be like, let's do it.
Put us in. Were you like, if I don't remember the backstory, were you like a family dinner and it hit you like we're supposed to be the one?
So
like,
we were in the adoption process for a baby.
Yes.
And we just kept hitting like these road bumps and we were not feeling peace about it, which was kind of crazy. So we just put it on pause and we knew it. We've always felt called to adopt.
Yes.
But then my grandmother, so we adopted Justice, my biological,
who we love, my son's best friend,
my biological cousin. So he was living with my grandmother. And so when my grandmother passed away from cancer about a year or so ago, it was 5 days until he moved into our house. It was like a 5-day decision, which is kind of crazy to think about when I look back at it. And I remember going to Pastor Earl and being like, Pastor Earl, what do you think? Like, is this the right move for us? And I will never forget, Pastor Earl was like, the Bible says to take care of widows and orphans. That's what scripture says. So I don't see why this wouldn't be the right thing for you. And God had already been so much preparing our heart for it. And so that when it happened, we were just like, let's do it.
Wow.
Now it's been hard for sure.
Of course.
But it's also just been really special to see the life come back in his eyes, to see the way he walks now versus when he moved in with us. But I think that it's always been in those moments of just radical obedience that we have seen God strengthen our marriage. We have seen God move. We have seen God take us to a new level and a new level of strength that we didn't know we had on the inside of us. And it's through the yeses that we could have said no, but I'm so grateful that we just decided in our marriage, we're just going to say yes. Like we're just going to say yes to what God puts in front of us.
Beautiful.
And that has literally been such a game changer and allowed us to experience so many things. So like, I feel like our lives are so rich. Because we have just decided that we're going to say yes to what God is calling us to do.
Which is the best posture. It's the absolute best posture. And I do think like in this like season of life that we live in, this world that we live in, everyone is a planner and it's easier and kind of more of a lean towards what makes sense.
Yes.
And it doesn't make sense for someone y'all's age to adopt a teenager. And so I'm so glad, though, that you looked past what didn't make sense, because in the other side of it was something so special, so holy, and so beautiful. And so I'm praying that even as we're talking, that we can shake some girls out of only making decisions that make sense. And taking doing that radical obedience for the things of God. Like, obviously, we're not saying if you're dating someone and and everyone's like, this does not make sense. We're not saying stay in that relationship. We're talking about like radical obedience when the people that you trust in your life have peace, you and your spouse or you and your family have peace, then taking that jump because it didn't make sense. But it was so right. And I think we sometimes logic ourselves out of radical obedience and doing something that is not scripted, because you did not script that in your plan. Like when you're dreaming of your Pinterest board, you weren't like, I'm going to have a teenage son, but it's kind of better than what you could have scripted.
It is. It's so much. It's been so sweet. But I think I remember all the feelings of insecurity. Like it didn't make sense of being like, I'm double his age. Like, what are people gonna think? What are people gonna say? What, like, this is so crazy.
It's very crazy.
And now it's just so funny looking back on it, because now it just feels normal because it's how God designed it to be. And so we still get weird looks all the time, you know, we still are people confused, but now it's kind of fun. And we're just like, no, it's our family, and it's been such a blessing having him in our house, like such a blessing.
What would you say to someone who's afraid to take a step in radical obedience and doing something that on paper, like, it doesn't make sense? And they feel paralyzed because they're staring at this opportunity. And I feel that in my spirit that someone has some opportunities that are like put in front of them by God, but it doesn't make sense because of the plan that they had. What advice would you have for that person who's like paralyzed?
Ooh, definitely prayer. Prayer. I feel like when God has asked me to step into something radically obedient, like he's put the nudge, he's made it clear. And then I think just sometimes it's easier said than done. But to just take the step and trust, like it takes a level of trust. But that's where faith comes in. That's where faith comes in. If we did everything according to plan and in our own strength and what makes sense, like I feel like that doesn't leave room for us to like grow in our faith.
So good.
And so I feel like that's where the faith comes in of just like sometimes God asks us to take a leap before we can see the whole picture. Actually, I've never seen the whole picture. You know, I've never actually. And so when it does feel, even if it does feel out of control, or it's probably because it's bigger than you. And that's what God has taught me, is like he's asking me to take a step because there's people on the other side. There's lives on the other side, that it's bigger than me. And so if not to just do it for me, but for the people on the other side. And because that's, I feel like it just has those moments in my life has been because God wants to grow me, but also there's people on the other side of it.
So well said and so true. And I feel like as the girls are listening, that this is going to give people language and framework for it's not, because I think sometimes we can be so indoctrinated with like, how's this affect me?
Right.
But if we change our lens of who's on the other side of this, what I'm calling radical obedience, it's like so many lives are going to be impacted by us getting uncomfortable.
So true.
But it is wild how we're so programmed to only want to do what feels good and what feels right, as opposed to like, even though I'm like scared, God, I'm going to do it anyways. God, I'm going to trust you.
Right.
And that you're going to meet me, even though I don't see the rest of the chapter or the rest of the sentence.
And I think a lot of us pray these prayers too, like, God, use me.
Exactly.
Like, God,
pick me.
Is there more for me?
Yes.
And then we come up to that and you're like, oh, whoa, this
exactly.
This wasn't what I expected.
Sing it than to live it out.
Way easier to say it.
Yeah.
I remember praying those prayers like, God, like use me, like let me be a vessel for you. And then be like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have prayed that.
Exactly. You know? Exactly. Yes.
And so I think a lot of us desire that.
Exactly.
But then it's like, okay, now we have to take the leap of faith.
Yes.
And that's where the trust comes in.
So good. So good. Yeah. I feel so like encouraged even after this conversation to do some more, to like refresh my heart on faith, because I feel like we don't really talk about faith that much anymore, meaning I think everyone just is into what makes sense.
Yes.
And it's like we can't live without faith.
No, it's so
true. And it's impossible to please God. The Bible says that without faith.
I've been reading in Matthew, in the book of Matthew, and one thing that has stuck out to me so much is that Jesus is doing all of these healings, but it's like faith is the catalyst for all of it. It's like he healed them because they had faith. He healed them because they believed.
Yeah.
And that has been like challenging me so much in the season of like, all it took was faith. Like you didn't have to do a dance or like, it was
exactly.
Like, it was because of people's faith in Jesus that he was able to perform the miracle.
That right there. And I think that this conversation is also going to stir up faith in people again, because I feel like we become so self-dependent, especially post-pandemic, where we're like, okay, I got to figure it out. If no one else is going to do it, I got to do it. Instead of saying like, yes, I'm going to put my muscle into it, but first God, go first, and you fill in the gap. And I remember during the pandemic singing this song, like there was this song, like it was about being available. And it was like, use me, God. It was like an elevation song that I would sing all over again. It was like, Lord, I'm available. It was something along those lines. I remember singing, it was like my anthem. But then when I was so pressed and so crushed, and God was like, you've been singing this whole pandemic that you're available. And that's why you're in the fire because I made you available, but you sang it. But it is wild to live out what you sing.
Yes.
It's like, whew, I used to play it all the time. But then God's like, well, you made yourself available.
Like, take my life.
Exactly.
Like singing
exactly.
It, and you're like, wait.
Oh, right. Exactly. Can I take those words back? But it like makes you who you are.
Yeah.
The fire.
Yes.
And speaking of the fire, I've watched you and your husband walk through so much fire lately, but not smell like smoke. And I think sometimes I was just thinking through our conversation today, and I was thinking through just like timeline. And I was thinking recently, like, I want to say like within the year, we like met and we had 2 new like adventures for you guys to take on.
Yes.
And the 2 new adventures were, we want to start a college.
Yes.
And we want you to like lead it, found it, and just like launch it, because why not? And then the other thing that we had on our heart is we were brainstorming and talking about what would it be like as a church to start a young adults ministry. Because our church has a lot of young families and young singles. And so it's taken us a minute to like get to the place where we have like people that are old enough to like have a college or have a young adults ministry, because we have so many like babies.
Yeah.
And I remember at the same time, it was almost like we had twins the hard way.
It was.
Where we were like, okay, let's start a college, and also
and let's
start a whole young adult service and build it from the ground up.
Yes.
And I remember both of you like immediately were like, let's do this. Yes. And we've watched you both like, I remember you put together a proposal of like, you guys met with Earl and I, and he was like sharing his heart on some of the framework of what he would want a young adult service to kind of feel like. And then you guys put together this proposal that I literally had no edits for.
Aww.
I was like, this proposal needs to be the proposal that every department uses to present anything. It was just everything we would have wanted and more. And we started on this adventure of starting a college, and now we have a college. And you're doing such a great job.
Thank
and
you.
so if anyone who's listening knows of anyone who's college age that wants to run with us at Shoreline City, jump on the journey.
Apply now.
Like, yes,
ShorelineCityCollege.com.
Yes, say it. I'm talking to the dean right now. And so maybe you'll have some favor with her.
Applications are open.
Yes. And it's just been beautiful to watch what God is doing with the young adults of our church, and watch you and your husband lead it so beautifully. But I think sometimes in life, you say yes to God and you start this adventure and you start building, but then life hits.
Yep.
And what I'm watching happen in our generation right now is people start building something beautiful. They get the yes from God. It starts out working, but then life hits and then they shrink back.
Yeah.
And then they think, I guess I'm not called.
Right.
I guess I heard wrong because it's so hard.
Yeah.
And I've watched you both still keep your yes, even when the fire, because I feel like the fire for y'all turned up. Because for Earl and I personally, the fire, we've had the most intense, worst spiritual warfare when we said yes to planting this church. I felt like we thought we had experienced warfare.
It's real.
Then we said yes to moving our family to Dallas, and the fire just went to a whole nother level. And I got stories upon stories of the fire that made me and is still making me. But I think sometimes after the yes, sometimes comes a fire.
Yeah.
But I think the fire takes people out many times because it's hard. And you don't expect when you're doing like what God's called you to do. Like in your back of your mind, you know the people that went before us, that they all went through the fire. But for some reason, we're just like, Paul, he was such a baddie. And he just like, he was so courageous. But like when you study what Paul went through, like he went through the fire and that's what made him a baddie.
Right.
But I think people forget about the fire and then the fire takes them out.
Right.
But I watched you both not get consumed by the fire, but get purified by the fire. And so I want to talk a little bit about the fire because I keep watching our generation, your generation, second guess their call and quit when the fire happens or when the warfare happens. And I'm praying that people are going to be able to borrow my courage, your courage, borrow the courage that Jesus took on the cross and not get taken out prematurely. Because I do believe that the darts that came at y'all were because the enemy was mad
For sure.
because you said yes. And obviously he has a target on the heart of the next generation. And as a church, we decide to like serve the next generation in like a new layer.
Yes.
And he got very upset.
Yep.
But that did not cause y'all to quit. And so I want to talk about some of the fires that you walked through. Because there was like 3. They were like back to back.
There was
like, I felt like there's 3 in a row.
Yeah, and recently too, my family went through a lot of stuff. My nephew, and my family,
my gosh, that's
and
right.
I, like you mentioned, I am so close to my family.
Yes,
and so sometimes I feel like God can almost like come for people I love.
Exactly.
And I'm like,
yes,
come for me. You know, because I hate seeing other people, your family hurt.
So many hospital visits. Yeah.
So many. My health.
Yes.
I love working out. A lot of people, if they know that about me.
Yes.
And I feel like it was a season where I felt so out of control over something that I cared so deeply about.
Yes, a habit, like a daily habit and practice. I want to talk about that for a second. So I want to talk about all the fires because I feel like it is where people are living right now. And they think that there's not life outside the fire. And they feel like maybe you can't relate to them or I can't relate to them because sometimes we don't talk about our fires. But like, we're about to have a fireside chat.
Yep.
So cozy up, girls.
Let's do it. Let's go.
Don't let her cute khaki jacket fool you. She has been refined. I have been refined. And so let's talk about some of those fires and what, like the actual fire and then what God did through the fire. And so the ones that are coming to my mind, of course, your family fires.
Yes.
But then it felt like it was like first year health, which like you're like one of the fittest, healthiest people I know. And then all of a sudden you went through a season where the doctor was like, no more heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And you're in constant pain.
Yeah.
But you still were showing up. So can you talk about that for a second? Then we'll go to Thomas.
For sure.
Yeah.
That was one of the hardest things I walked through. It's been actually a 1.5 year long journey from when I first started having joint pain and was in and out of doctors and was having to like tape up my knees.
So crazy.
Just really crazy stuff that felt so out of control.
Yep.
And I, for so long, was like, I just want answers. I just want answers. Going to all the doctors.
Yes.
I was trying to find all the answers. I was trying to take all the supplements.
Yes.
I was trying to literally do everything.
Yeah.
And I just feel like God finally had to bring me to a place of, number 1, it's okay to not have all the answers.
Wow.
Number 2, realizing that he's the ultimate healer.
Say it.
And then number 3, God will, I feel like that was a protection because I feel like that could have been something, I'm not going to say could have. was idolizing in
Wow.
that season of my life.
Wow,
And
Cassidy.
so I've just tried to remind myself that like God loves me so much
Yeah.
that it's not like he causes like bad, like you don't
Sure.
want me in pain,
No, right.
but he'll protect me. He will protect
Whoa.
me, and because he loves me.
Yeah.
And so, and God like disciplines us because he loves his children.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was just a really hard season. But I feel like there's kind of two ways you can go when you go through the
Talk
fire.
about it.
Is you can like escape and try
Yep.
to like drown it out and try
Yes.
to drown it
Yep.
and try to distract
Yep.
yourself.
Drink,
Or
shop. Some people drink, some
Yeah.
people shop.
Shop.
Yes.
There was a season I was
Become
actually
cold.
so desperate in this season where I cut out anything like that. And that was extreme.
Wow.
But
Yes.
I'd actually deleted social media off my phone.
Wow.
I stopped online shopping.
Yep,
I didn't
yep.
even go to the mall, which
Wow.
is so crazy.
Yes.
I wasn't watching Netflix
Wow.
because I was so desperate to be like, God, I just want to fill my heart and my mind with truth and
Wow,
nothing,
Cassidy.
everything. Like I don't want anything coming inside of me that
Yes.
doesn't reinforce like what
Wow.
your word says. And so I feel like
It's
because
powerful.
I leaned into it, I found
Yes.
like a peace that I didn't even have when I
Wow.
wasn't in the fire. You know,
Whoa.
like it's crazy that the most peace that I've had has actually been in this past season of going through the highs and lows
Wow.
because I've realized that peace is not based on my circumstances and not circumstantial, but it's been a result of like seeking God and like being in his word.
Wow.
But that came out of a desperation. But what I realized in that season is being desperate for God is actually a gift. And I think that sometimes we just try to get out of it and we overlook
do.
that this dependency is actually a gift. And it's actually some of those seasons I've looked back on and been like, man, I remember
Wow.
like being so in the word and like being in God's presence.
Yes.
And it was because he brought me to a level of dependency. And that's really what I've been walking through the past
Right.
15 months because I did get some answers that it's like some autoimmune stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And which is crazy
It is.
because it just comes and goes and it flares up and it
Yep.
doesn't. And I've tried so hard to get all the answers and
Yes.
do all the things and then having to come to the place of like, God,
You can't control it.
I
Yeah.
can't control it.
Yep.
I can't
Yep.
control. Like I don't have control over this.
Right.
And for so long, I thought I'll just do all the right things and I will heal myself and I will
Right.
eat
Yep.
whole foods. And I
Yes.
will not eat the seed oils.
Nothing inflammatory.
Nothing
Yeah.
inflammatory.
Yeah.
And God's like, I'm just asking you to trust me, you know? And so that's really what I
Wow.
learned through that season of just like, you can
And-
do all the right things, but at the end of the day, God's in control.
And sometimes the math does not math.
It does not
You
matter.
know, like
No.
it does not math. Yeah. But you still can find peace when the math doesn't math.
100%.
Which is that's what I'm praying that girls who are listening
Yes.
take away. And because I feel like even as we're talking, there's girls who there's something that they used to do or that they found too much value or validation in that is like they had a shift and it's been taken away.
Yep.
Could be a relationship, could be a hobby,
Totally.
a habit, a
Yep.
job. And it's like almost like this season forced you to find your full identity
Yes.
in Jesus
100%.
and not in performance.
Yep.
Which is like wild.
So crazy.
It's so wild. And you don't know that your identity's in something until it's gone.
that.
Yeah.
I didn't until you're like bawling.
Yes.
You're like, who am I?
Right?
And you're like, wait.
And everyone's like,
I put
hey,
a lot of weight on this.
that. And I remember like, because you're like, you can lift, you're small, but you can like lift really heavy things. And I remember a season where physically your doctors and like professionals were saying like, don't lift things, but you would go to a class and you'd watch people lifting things that you
Yep.
could lift with your pinky, but you had to like lift something smaller, which also kills your pride.
It does.
You just
Yeah,
had
yeah,
to,
for sure.
like, you literally had to like go through a dying to self.
It's so
season.
true.
Yeah. But
It's so
you
true.
let the fire like make you instead of breaking you. Oh, pop off,
There you
Oneka.
go.
Like rhyming over here. But then you're still in your yes season of like, God, I'm saying yes to what you've called me to. But just because we say yes doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
No.
And I think we believe when we're like living a life for the Lord. I don't
Right.
know why we believe this.
I know.
But we get so thrown when the yes becomes difficult.
Yes.
But then, so you're like, okay, we're building a college ministry. We're building a college. Then you're struggling with your health while
Right.
we're building the college. I remember you were still struggling when we gave you the invitation to say yes to young adults and college.
For sure.
Then we get college going. It's like popping off. Like there's so much electricity and excitement with the serve team, with the kids that are coming. And then randomly your husband gets in a car accident when he already has like a season of concussions. Then he gets another concussion, which then takes him out for a season. And then you're like nursing yourself, taking care of a teenager, building a college ministry, but then also taking care of your husband. And so how did you get through that? And what did you learn through that? Because we still got one more storm to talk about before we wrap this convo.
Specifically with Thomas, I remember one night right after it happened, I was crying in my room.
Wow.
Because I was like, man, this should be the time people are rallying around me. Like I'm going through this health thing.
That's so real.
And I'm like,
that's so real.
Now I switched into like this mode of like, nurse mode of like, okay,
what does he
whatever
need?
it takes. And I remember God in that moment being like, number one, like, I'm not overlooking you.
Oof.
Like number two, like I'm with you.
That and like say that again. I'm not overlooking you. I'm with you. I feel like girls need to hear that.
That's what I really felt God say of like, I'm not, I know what you're dealing with your health.
Yes.
Like I'm with you. Like I can be the ultimate comforter for you.
Wow.
I'm everything that you need. I'm not overlooking you in this moment. Cause that's what it felt like a little bit. Cause it can,
Yes.
But I remember God telling me in that moment to ask for help. And I think this is something that's easier said than done. And we hear it all the time.
We do.
But I actually realized I'm terrible at asking for help.
Wow.
And we kind of realized Thomas and I both were not amazing at asking for help. And I remember God telling me like, do this season different.
Good job.
Like ask for help.
Yes.
And I started a group like one of the things we needed help with was rides.
Right.
Because I was the only one able to drive.
Right.
Obviously, Justice can't drive. And Thomas can't drive for 3 months because he had a seizure.
Yes.
And
which we haven't gotten to that yet.
No.
We're still at the car accident.
Oh, yeah. We're still at the car accident.
Yes. Yeah. We're still at the seizure, girls. So
still at the car.
Yeah. Get your coffee heated up.
But I feel like it challenged me to, and that's why community is so important.
Yes.
And
say that.
It's been just, it's all, and it's from this church too. It's from the connect groups. It's from serving. That's how I have the friends that I have is from being planted. And I remember starting a group text and people praying.
Yep.
You and Pastor Earl sending us meals.
Yes.
You coming to the hospital. Like all of the Pastor Earl literally showed up in the emergency room 10 minutes after he was in this car wreck. And it just, once again, learning that we're not in control.
Right. So
learning also that God will build the church regardless of us. Like I think sometimes we think God needs us.
Exactly.
And Thomas and I have both learned in this season, like we're going to keep saying yes. We're going to keep stepping into what he has for us.
Right.
But God doesn't like need like us.
Wow. No,
you're
right. Yes.
And so that was the car wreck. I'm like getting ahead of this.
No, yes.
That was a crazy season for sure.
Because we had just launched Young Adults. I think we were like a month in, maybe 2, maybe. It was early. It was very early in.
It was early.
It was,
but I think for Thomas and I, we've seen people go before us. We met at Young Adults. Like we were in college and that's where we met. And we had someone who set the table for us. We had friends. Like we had someone marry us who was our college pastor.
That's so awesome.
We had community. We went on the trips.
Yes.
And so it was seeing us get to do that as a church for other people, I think is what kept us going.
Wow. And you had purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is really a dream on, of course, you're in Pastor Earl's heart, and then a dream on Thomas and all of our hearts as a church.
Beautiful. Yes.
And I think that's really what kept us going from not shrinking back.
Wow.
Is like somebody went before us, and you and Pastor Earl have to, like, planting this church, like you said, the spiritual warfare that you guys faced. Yeah. I think you taught us to not be surprised by it.
Right.
I think if anything, it fueled us because I'm like, okay, well, we're
Buckle
clearly
up.
doing something right.
Exactly.
Because the enemy is so mad right now.
Very,
And so I think when I shifted that mindset too of like, not like, woe is me when this happens, but like, I'm not surprised by this.
And I
like
think
the enemy is coming.
Exactly. But he's defeated. He's so defeated.
For sure.
And I think it's so easy to go to the woe is me and the why me.
Right.
But that's what paralyzes us, isolates us, and slows down our breakthrough and our healing when we get stuck in our head.
Yeah.
But you said some amazing things in the fire that it's so important to be reading our word.
For sure.
It's so important to be careful of like what our intake.
Yeah.
You know, to make sure we're putting the right things in us. You were very proactive. You stayed in community. You asked for help. These are some handles that the girls can even hear and glean from this this conversation. Like, ask for help. Be in the word. Stay planted in church.
Yes.
Remember that God sees you. These things are like lifelines when you're going through the fire. And then one of the most recent fires is then we get through the wreck. He's back again. You know, he's almost pretty much himself.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then he has a seizure. Like on a regular day, I think I had friends in from out of town.
It was a random Thursday.
It was like a random
at like 12 p.m.
Yeah, just I think I was on my way to Hillstone or something with some friends that were in town. And then we get this text message that like Thomas had a seizure, which he's like young and
so wild.
It's so wild. And then your life changes again, and then we're back at the hospital in an emergency room. Doctors are trying to figure out like what happened, why did it happen? And then we're back in another season of like the fire. But yet again, God took the ashes, turned it into something so beautiful. You both are standing so tall. How did you make it through the most recent fire? And how are you making it through this fire?
Prayer. Like I said, just a dependence on the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
And it, like I've talked about, it has taken such an intentionality.
Yes.
And I never want to step out of the covering. And I feel like this is such a safe house to be planted in. The community I've met. Like, I don't know why during one of the hardest seasons I would step out from this. Like, this is where I feel like I'm most covered and most supported. And I'm walking in what God has for me. And so it was never an option for us to take a step back. I think you have those thoughts like, you know, if I just go on a month-long trip to Italy, like all my problems will be solved.
Right.
But it's just, I'm learning it's just not true. And to celebrate the wins, because even with all of the fires, there's so many wins. And you can always see the wins. So to not focus on all the negative, to focus on all the fires, but to also see the goodness and what God is doing, that's something that has really helped me get through it, to celebrate, even if the win that day is like, the sunset's beautiful, you know, like it's not a big win.
Exactly.
To not just focus on the fire, but I just try to keep my eyes like on the Lord and on the big picture. And so that's really how I've been getting through it. But like I said, like I feel like in the past I would have tried to escape or like drown it out or like scroll or like watch the Netflix or like just try to go out to like fun restaurants and like go on vacation. And I've just learned that that's actually not the thing that has brought me peace. But like to your point, it's been reading in the Word. It's been praying. It's been asking for help. It's been starting the group text and be like, can you guys help pick up Justice for School? We have a group text that literally is our young adults team, some people from the Bigs team, and the way that people have picked him up from school is just so overwhelming in the best way possible. And so that's really how I've been getting through this fire is just keeping my eyes on Jesus and being in his word. That's like a non-negotiable for me. Like if my morning doesn't start off the right way, which is like being in his presence, I just feel like I don't even have the strength for that day some days.
That's real.
And so that being just such a non-negotiable thing for me, I feel like that has been the thing that has gotten me through this season. And to see what is happening at the Six, to see what is happening
in
at
college.
Church. The other day at worship night, getting to baptize people and just realizing like people are literally going from
the whole time
dead to life. And that's what we get to be a part of. And it makes everything else really pale in comparison. Like it makes all the little things that could be, obviously, Thomas, that was a big fire, but just when you really think about it in light of God's mercy and his goodness, it's like, okay, we're going to be okay. Like God's got us. He's protecting us.
Say it.
We're in the palm of his hand. Like at the end of the day, he wouldn't give us more that we couldn't handle. And he's going to turn it all around for his glory. And he's going to grow us through it. And there's just going to be new levels of, you know, stepping into what he has for us on the other side of it. So I think reminding myself of that truth every single day has been the thing of just like, honestly, it's given me more of a fire where I'm like, no.
Say it.
Like, I'm not stepping back. You know, like, why would I step back? Why would I do that? Because God's with us. God's going before us.
Yes.
He's surrounding us.
Exactly.
We have everything we need. We don't lack anything. And so I think just reminding myself in this season is what's been getting me through, for sure.
Again, making me cry.
Oh,
So
love you.
Proud of you. What a conversation. What a woman. And I'm just like in awe at God in you and through you.
Thank
and
you.
I feel like you gave girls context and tools and strategy for facing the fire, but not letting the fire consume them, but letting the fire refine them.
Right.
I feel like these fires have refined you both. And I'm so excited for all that's on the other side of the fire. And I can't wait to hear the stories of girls that were like, when I heard this conversation with you and Cassidy, I was in the fire, but I did not let it consume me. I think about, I get my Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and how they were in the fire, but there's another in the fire.
That's a good one.
Standing next to me. But sorry, girls. I like to sing, but I don't sing, as you can tell. But all that to say, you reminded the girls that there is another one in the fire.
Yeah.
Fire can make you better. You're not alone in the fire, and what to do when you're in the fire and when you're out of the fire. But I just can't wait to see the beauty that come from the ashes. I feel like even as I'm talking now that there's some girls that are in an ashes season.
Yeah.
But this conversation is going to help them get to the beauty. Because some people are stuck in the ashes, but God is like, you know what? Let me be God in this. Let me rescue you. Let me sustain you.
Yes.
And I can't wait to hear the stories. But I love you.
Love you so much.
Thank you for hanging with the girls and pouring into the girls.
Awesome.
And until next time.
Love you.
Love you.
Love you.
And love you, girls.
Love you.